It started with the sharp crack of glass shattering against the quiet rhythm of a late Saturday afternoon. My son, Ethan, only 13 years old but sharper than most grown men, had been home alone while I worked an overtime shift and my wife visited her mother. By the time I checked my phone hours later, the neighborhood had already been turned upside down, and Karen, the self-anointed ruler of our HOA, was once again at the heart of it all. That day she didn't just file another petty complaint, didn't just wave around her clipboard like some medieval scepter. No, she crossed a line so unforgivable that even now, months later, neighbors still shake their heads when they talk about it. She sent 2 men, her so-called community enforcers. Though everyone knew they were just washed-up buddies, she bribed with HOA funds to break into my house. The pretext was some nonsense about inspection authority, but the truth was far simpler. She wanted to scare us into submission. What Karen didn't count on was Ethan. Small for his age, quiet, a kid who'd rather read a survival manual than play video games. Ethan had grown up hearing my stories of military service and my insistence on preparedness. He knew the layout of the house like the back of his hand. He knew how to lock down doors, where to find the tools, and most importantly, how to stay calm when danger knocked. And when danger knocked that afternoon, it wasn't polite. The 2 goons pried at the back door with a crowbar, muttering curses loud enough for Ethan to hear from upstairs. Karen's voice carried over like a drill sergeant on steroids, shrieking about how the violations in our home had to be dealt with immediately. She wasn't even trying to hide the trespass, she reveled in it, convinced she was untouchable. Ethan's heart pounded, but instead of freezing, he sprang into motion. He remembered every word I had drilled into him. Don't confront head-on. Outsmart. Outsmarting keeps you alive. He grabbed the roll of duct tape from his desk drawer, a length of fishing line from my tackle box, and the old slingshot he had begged me to teach him how to use. By the time the intruders forced their way into the kitchen, Ethan had already set his first trap. A line stretched low across the hall sent one of the men sprawling face first into a stack of metal pans Ethan had arranged like dominoes. The crash was so loud that Karen shrieked in panic, certain the police would show up. But instead of retreating, she doubled down, shouting at the men to find that boy and take pictures as evidence. What she didn't know was that Ethan had his phone recording the entire scene from the moment the first window cracked. His quiet commentary, his steady breath, and then the chaos of the intruders storming the house, every second was captured. He lured them into the living room, where he had coated the hardwood floor with dish soap, sending the second goon skidding into the coffee table, smashing it into pieces. Karen stormed inside herself then, her bulk filling the doorway, her face red and triumphant as if victory were already hers. But Ethan was ready. He'd rigged the doorway with a bucket of flour balanced perfectly on the top frame. When Karen barged through, the entire thing dumped over her, covering her from head to toe in a ghostly white cloud. Neighbors later told me they could hear her howls from half a block away. It should have ended there, but the story twisted in ways none of us expected. Because just as Karen stumbled blindly, coughing and spitting flour, a figure appeared at the open front door, a figure Ethan didn't recognize, but I sure as hell did when I watched the footage later. It was Officer Ramirez, the patrol cop who had been quietly investigating Karen for misuse of HOA funds. By pure chance, he had stopped by our street to question a neighbor when he heard the ruckus and rushed over. Ramirez froze when he saw the scene. 2 men sprawled, moaning, in my living room, Karen dripping flour and screaming curses, and Ethan standing with his slingshot drawn, as steady as a soldier. "Drop it!" Ramirez shouted, but his eyes quickly shifted, realizing Ethan wasn't the threat here. In seconds he had Karen and her goons face down on the floor, handcuffs clicking shut. My son's video recording became the nail in the coffin, not just for the charges of attempted breaking and entering, but for the web of fraud Karen had woven for years. She had used HOA dues to pay her goons, calling them security contractors. She had filed false invoices for repairs that never happened, pocketing the difference. And now, caught in broad daylight with flour dripping from her hair, she couldn't spin her way out of it. When I rushed home after the frantic call from Ramirez, my heart nearly burst with pride and fury all at once. Ethan ran into my arms, shaking but smiling, the weight of fear finally breaking into relief. I held him tighter than I ever had before, whispering that he'd done exactly the right thing, that he was braver than many men I'd served with. Across the street, neighbors gathered, their phones raised, recording Karen's humiliating march to the squad car. For once, the entire community wasn't afraid. They were laughing, clapping, even chanting, "No more Karen!" But the deeper twist came weeks later, during Karen's trial. Testimony revealed that one of her board allies, someone we had all trusted, had been feeding her information, pointing out which families were most vulnerable, which houses she could target with fines or threats. Betrayal ran deeper than we imagined. Yet it was Ethan's video that dismantled it all. A 13-year-old boy's courage exposing a rotten empire. As the gavel fell and Karen was sentenced, the judge's words rang out like a closing hymn. Power without integrity is nothing but tyranny. This community deserves better. Karen wailed as she was led away, but no one shed a tear. Instead, they looked at Ethan, sitting in the front row with his head held high, and they saw not just a boy, but a symbol of resilience. The new HOA leadership invited him to cut the ribbon on the rebuilt community playground, a gesture that seemed small compared to what he'd endured but meant the world to him. And me? I never stopped reminding him that courage isn't about size, age, or strength. It's about standing tall when the world tries to knock you down. The days that followed were a whirlwind of headlines, interviews, and whispered conversations across every porch and backyard fence in the neighborhood. For years, Karen had been a storm cloud hanging over our cul-de-sac, but now the storm had broken, and everyone could finally see the lightning for what it really was. Neighbors who once stayed silent out of fear were suddenly emboldened. People brought casseroles to our doorstep, not just to thank Ethan, but to confess their own stories of harassment, intimidation, and secret fines Karen had imposed. One woman told us how Karen had threatened foreclosure over a supposedly illegal birdhouse in her yard. Another man admitted Karen had extorted money from him by promising to make violations disappear. The evidence wasn't just a trickle, Anna Maria, it was a flood, and Karen was drowning in it. Meanwhile, Ethan became the unexpected hero of the town. The video of his flower trap, the slip-and-slide living room, and the goons sprawled out like bad sitcom characters spread like wildfire online. Strangers messaged us from across the country, calling him the real-life Home Alone kid. He laughed when people said it, but when I looked in his eyes, I saw something deeper than pride. I saw a boy who had been forced to face fear head-on and had walked away stronger. I saw resilience stitched into his very bones. But while neighbors rallied, Karen wasn't finished lashing out. From her holding cell, she filed motions, claimed she was the real victim, and even tried to paint Ethan as a delinquent who assaulted her hired men. It would have been laughable if it weren't so venomous. Her lawyer stood in court, red-faced and grasping for straws, arguing that Karen's actions had been community enforcement gone wrong. The judge, unimpressed, cut him off more than once. And then came the twist that shook even me. One of the goons flipped. Faced with the threat of prison time, he confessed under oath that Karen had paid him thousands over the past year to intimidate non-compliant households. He revealed how she funneled money from HOA dues into fake contracts and split it between herself and her cronies. He even admitted she had a hit list of families she wanted to bring in line. We were at the very top. When that list was shown in court, the entire room gasped. Families saw their names, their addresses, their violations. Some had never even known they were being targeted until that moment. The rage that erupted was like a collective roar. People who had once looked at Karen with irritation now looked at her with outright disgust. She wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was a tyrant who had built her power on fear and fraud. The trial stretched on for weeks, every day peeling back another layer of rot. Financial ledgers showed luxury spa trips billed as community wellness retreats. HOA credit cards showed steak dinners, jewelry purchases, even hotel stays for her so-called enforcers. Each revelation was like another nail in the coffin. Karen sat there, her once smug face sagging into a mask of bitterness, flower long since washed away but humiliation still clinging to her like a second skin. And then the day of sentencing arrived. The courtroom was packed to bursting. Reporters lined along the back, neighbors filling every row. Ethan sitting beside me in his pressed shirt, his chin lifted with quiet pride. Karen shuffled in, shackled. No makeup to mask the lines etched deep into her face. The judge's gavel struck once, silencing the room. He spoke with measured weight, his words carrying the force of both justice and sorrow. This community trusted you. You abused that trust. You endangered a child, endangered a family, and sought to rule through fear. For that, you will pay. The sentence was harsh but deserved 10 years in state prison for conspiracy, fraud, reckless endangerment, and harassment. Karen's scream filled the chamber as deputies pulled her to her feet, but no one flinched. If anything, people sighed with relief. The queen of intimidation had been dethroned for good. Afterward, the neighborhood transformed in ways I hadn't thought possible. The HOA board was dissolved, replaced by a community-led committee with open votes and transparent budgets. People who had once avoided each other now hosted block parties, potlucks, and town hall meetings. For the first time in years, laughter echoed freely across lawns where silence and fear had reigned. And at the heart of it all was Ethan. They asked him to cut the ribbon at the community center reopening. He stood there, nervous but brave, holding oversized scissors in hands that had once clutched a slingshot in fear. When the ribbon snapped, the cheer that rose up was deafening. Cameras flashed, news anchors praised him, and neighbors lifted him onto their shoulders. But what struck me most was not the noise, it was the look in his eyes. He wasn't basking in fame. He wasn't reveling in revenge. He was proud that he had protected his home, proud that he had stood tall when it mattered most. And I, standing beside him, realized something profound. The real lesson wasn't about traps or tricks or even justice served in a courtroom. It was about courage, about what happens when one person, no matter how young, refuses to bow to fear. Karen had all the power, all the connections, all the bluster, yet she crumbled because her foundation was built on lies. Ethan, with nothing but quick thinking and heart, had shown the entire neighborhood what integrity looked like. Now, when I walk past the mural painted on the community center wall, I see his silhouette, slingshot in hand, standing tall against the chaos. Underneath are the words written by the neighbors themselves. One brave voice can end 1,000 lies, and I know they're right. So I leave you with this. If your child were in Ethan's place, would you want him to fight back the same way? Would you trust him to rise when the world tried to knock him down? Or do you believe Karen's punishment wasn't enough for the terror she unleashed? Share your thoughts, because justice is only complete when every voice is heard.